So I'm more than pleased to have Konstantin join me. When I was thinking through this problem, and let me set the table before I ask Konstantin his questions. I've been working on this idea that the reason that we're having a hard time within Republicans in the United States trying to unlock support for Ukraine is because a large portion of Republican support is evangelicals. Evangelicals are hearing this message from Russia about traditional values and they're saying the same things, the same words, but I think they mean something different. The way they perceive, the way that they understand what it means, the God over Russia and the rest of the world is kind of terrible. The way that they're coming at upholding these traditional values, I think is something very different. And so I reached out to Constantine a little while back and I said, hey, I've come to believe that this is true, that Republicans and maybe they're deceived by Russia's talking about traditional values. Can you help me unpack that? And I explained, like, I'm a conservative. I'm a Reagan conservative. I'm pre-Trumpian kind of conservative, the kind that would have looked at Ukraine and been like, well, yeah, what do they need? And so I come at this a little bit differently than my other Republican brethren who are, like lost in this wilderness of listening to Russian talking points and misinformation. So I reached out to Constantine, and if you want to understand how somebody thinks, ask somebody who's actually from there. Like I'm not the right guy to ask about. Well, the Democrats, how do they think about this? I'm not them. Ask somebody who's a Democrat. So I'm asking uh, probably the best source that I can think of here. And Constantine, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Darren.
So here's what
Let me just say a couple things. I overheard you saying you're pre-Trumpian conservative.
Yes, sir.
As you know, I spent quite some time in the USA, and I used to consider myself Republican. But then lately, I've been attacked all over on the internet and the comments and the emails. Oh, how can you be Republican? And I'm really lost about the American politics. My core values are God, family, freedom, and hard work. I thought
Yeah.
it used to be Republican values, but I don't know anymore. And this is, I don't call myself anything
Well,
anymore. And this is what I stand on:
yeah,
God,
the
family, hard
Republican
work, and freedom. And it's working pretty well for me.
Yeah, and the Republican brand has been dragged through the mud here lately. But I mean, those values are the same things that I value. I mean, that's not a problem. It's just that in a Trumpian era, so there's a difference between conservatives in the United States and Trumpian populists within the Republican Party. There's a very different kind of mindset about the way that we work, but we're similar enough that Trump's been able to kind of merge these groups together and become the standard bearer. So it is different. Now, what I really want to talk with you about is how different it is, like with what Russia is saying and what Americans, and you've been in America for enough time that you understand both sides of this, that Americans hear Russia talk about traditional values and they think, oh, see, they're the good guy. Like, how do you think that Russians are the good guys? Are you paying any attention at all to what they did to Ukraine? But if they're not paying enough attention and they're just hearing repeaters from like Tucker Carlson and others, then they might be deceived. So tell me what you perceive, your perception of Russia in relation to traditional values.
I'm actually glad that you reached out and asked, because to make a decision, to have an opinion, to form an opinion of a country and its values, you've got to know a little bit of history, or actually quite a bit of history, where Russia is coming from. And let me tell you a little about history. You see, Russia in the last 50 years had three sets of values.
Mhm.
And not too many people remember about that. I was born and I was growing up and I was taught one set of values. Then all of a sudden, everything changed, was transformed literally overnight, just like that. And the values that I had been taught for, 16 years, first 16 years of my life, they turned out to be fake. Okay, and then a new set of values was introduced, and we lived according to those values until about 2021, I would say 2022, and now country is going through another transformation, and the values that were there for 30 years changed overnight, and new values are introduced. So what kind of values are we talking about? Let me tell you. Okay, the USSR, um, communist values. The country was built on the communist values. My parents were taught. They taught me. The society taught. The school taught that I mean nothing. I'm a
Mhm.
speck of dust in the greatest country in the world, and my sole purpose is to serve the motherland.
Mhm.
And if motherland needs me, I am to take up arms and go and sacrifice my life. And this is the biggest happiness and the biggest heroism that can be achieved. Okay. So there were no people, there was no individuals, but there was
Right.
populace. Okay, that's the value, and God was not in the picture.
Mhm.
I was introduced to God at a very early age by my grandmothers, who were hiding that they were Christian, that they were believers all their lives. Okay, they were hiding from the society, but this is how I came to God. But the God was not in the picture. And then come late 80s, and the country starts changing rapidly, and it starts falling apart. We were seeing the same thing we start seeing right now. Okay, very similar processes. And the first thing that started suffering, values, because if you're taught one thing and then you go and look on the street, look at the stores, look around, and you see completely different thing, then you
Mhm.
start asking, questioning values. Just one example I remember quite well, and it's a very, very famous example. There was a public, uh, not research, uh, public mm, survey, public survey done in 1989 in seniors, high school seniors nationwide. And they were asked of their dream profession. Well, the boys, the majority of boys said that they want to join mafia and become racketeers when they graduate, and the
Wow.
girls said that they wanted to become prostitutes serving foreigners, because that's how they were to make money. You know, that dream jobs.
Wow.
What values are we talking about? Please explain, okay? And 1991 comes, and overnight, literally overnight, yesterday we woke up in one country, this morning we wake up, we fell asleep in one country, and
Mhm.
this morning we wake up, it's a different country, and the government disappears, and the values that they have been selling us for 70 years, they disappear. Okay, and people are left on their own, and the only value that appears is money, and people do anything for the money. Okay, everything else is just, hey, it's not important, and people feel betrayed. They say, look, they've been teaching us that, we shouldn't kill other people, we should be nice to others and stuff like that as members of the communist society. That's bull crap. Okay, that's not. Look, we are to make money because capitalism has won. We're part of capitalistic world, and
Can I ask
money
you
is the universal value.
can I ask you a question about that?
Sure,
So,
sure.
when you're talking about capitalism, I don't perceive what Russia was as capitalism as much as crony capitalism, a mafia style capitalism, an unfettered um, capitalism that played dirty tricks, not like capitalism within the rules. Is that a fair assessment of the 90s into the 2000s understanding of Russian capitalism?
Mm,
Or am I wrong? I could be
I
wrong.
think
That's fine.
I think you're wrong. My explanation is the wild, wild west. Okay,
Yeah, that's
complete
right.
freedom, complete freedom. Okay, government disappears. People are left on their own. People are there to protect themselves. and well, mafia played the role of police in some weird way. Okay,
Mhm.
um, and early 90s is the only time in Russia's history when Russia was actually free. People were free to do anything they wanted to. No licensing, no interference of government into their lives. Taxes pretty much zero, very, very low. Um, I like those years.
Okay.
I don't think that the crony capitalism, in the way that you just described, I think it was different. It was
So
tough.
so there was more
People were just
freedom.
learning new ways.
So there was more freedom, but there was almost a might makes right in that freedom, but it was far more freedom than what you see now.
Complete freedom, not
Okay.
much more. It was complete. Right now, there's lack of freedom. Back then, literally, the government disappeared, and people couldn't believe it. But at the same time, you see, no one was there to step in and to give new set of values, to
Right.
see, to show the way where to go in the future, saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, let's build a new society based on law and order, things like that, based on like Christian values." No, there was vacuum, and that vacuum brought in many good things and many many bad things. But
Right.
the universal value was making money,
Okay.
and people did not stop before doing anything to make buck.
Understood. Okay, so what changed? How did it change?
So uh, people, well, I think what Russia went through was pretty much normal process in terms of when a paradigm crumbles and a new one is introduced, then there is a transition period.
Okay.
Countries don't change overnight. Yesterday was communism, today we're living in perfect capitalism, and transition period took 10 years, and Russians were learning new ways. They were reinventing the wheel, so to speak, in many ways. And they started traveling outside of Russia. They started seeing how other countries, how the other people live. They started making mistakes and learning from them.
Mhm.
Okay, and year by year, country became better and better. Okay, and people started, uh, life started becoming better, so to speak.
Mhm.
And then the golden age began. I From 2000 to 2008,
Mhm.
um, a rain of petrodollars started showering over Russia, and people changed. They have grown so much. They have grown spiritually as well. The role of church grew by a great deal, and mafia disappeared. The government became reappeared, but it was not tyrannical. It was not as strong as it's now. It started conducting its functions. Okay, law and order was restored,
Mhm.
not just by the government's help, but because people grew to a level where they didn't want to live in arbitrariness anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the transition period was successfully completed. Okay, and then values were becoming different. Okay, people were becoming softer in a way. They got more empathy. They got more love. The church started becoming more and more important in the lives of
Mhm.
Russians, and I think it was Russia was on the right way in terms of values.
Mhm.
Russians started finding their own way
Okay.
in a way, and then of course the next period started when Vladimir Putin built his vertical of power and he started usurping power. Okay, um, it started in 2011. And when he became the president for the third time, well, he decided to become the president for the third time. And bit by bit, they started changing the country. They started changing the perception of the world among Russian people, and they started changing values. They started changing the role of Eastern Orthodox Church,
Mhm.
and they were fine tuning the country into change to support the government more and more. Okay, and then the war in Ukraine happened in 2022. There was a drastic change, just like that. An absolutely, completely new set of values was introduced. If from 2011 to 2022, the change was gradual and almost invisible, like boiling a frog type of thing,
Mhm.
But 2022, they just stepped in and said, KGB stepped in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do now. And if you don't like it, go to prison, gulag. The church did the same thing. They changed overnight in a great deal. Okay, they made a pact with the government, I guess, and propaganda started seeding these new values in Russian people. And it's been going on for 2 years now. Okay, and many Russians have been converted. Uh, it's sad. It's very, very sad. I'm seeing that my country is falling apart in front of my eyes. Okay, but let me tell you that to sum up, what's been happening in Russia, in the USSR, then in Russia, the foundation is values.
Okay.
Okay, everything's based on values, and the values just so different. Three completely different sets of values.
So, two things come to my mind as you were talking, if I could pause here for a moment. The first is that my perception from the outside looking in is that Russia is re-Sovietizing in authoritarianism, but not in Marxism. Like they're doing some of the same heavy-handed tactics from the Soviet era, but it's not for the sake of Leninist Marxist kind of uh, values. It wasn't about that. It's just about supporting Putin, about supporting the regime, about right and like the laws, the heavy-handed protests about protesting or can't say anything about the special military operation or those kinds of things. It's becoming more like that. Is that your perception, or is that not fair?
You're absolutely correct. Lenin
Okay.
and Marx are not. You're the first time you mentioning them is the first time I actually am hearing. Reminds me of good old days.
Mhm.
Um, Certainly, no Marx or Lenin has been said, but the idea is the same. Only Marx and Lenin were replaced by the Russian world. It's the
Right.
Russian world,
Yeah.
plain
Yeah.
and simple. Uh, you
That's right.
have to win people's support, to keep
Mhm.
them quiet, to lead them so they follow you. Okay, you have to sell them a grand idea. Before was communism, and the founders of the communism, Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, and and all those values I told you about. You are nothing. Your country is everything. Your purpose is to serve your country and society and your comrades and so forth. Now it's the same kind of idea, but in different words. Now it's the Russian world. Russians are the remnants of, the entire world is falling apart. The West, we're now clearly seeing, is satanic.
Mhm.
It's no good. It's falling apart, doesn't have any moral values left. It's evil. Okay. And Russia is the only country in the world that is standing up against the evil satanic West.
Okay.
Okay,
So
and it's a beacon of light to everyone. It's the values, it's the traditional values, it's the families, it's no LGBT plus or whatever you call it,
mhm.
no neutral gender toilets. That's the Russian values, and
Okay.
that's what they're selling to people. That's
That's right. They're talking all these traditional values terms, but on the basis of the Ruski Mir being the great messianic savior of the world. It's like they put on the cloak of the church in order to justify the Russian world, and everything spins around that. It's not because like so for example, I heard Archbishop Kirill talking about how with abortion, we need to stop abortion because it would fix the demographic crisis of Russia. And because they need, like, by extension, they need soldiers in 20 years, right? Like, that's the reason. It's not because your average churchgoer in America who just thinks, "Hey, look, that baby has a right to life, just like I do," right? They're on very different foundations, and that's what I'm trying to get at. I think that there's a significant difference here, and if evangelicals in the United States understood that, I think that they would have an allergic reaction to when Russia talks about traditional values. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Church is a part of this big machine. Propaganda is another part, and they've created this ideology. And then the name of the ideology is Ruski Mir, Russian world.
Mhm.
The thing is, they have not defined it clearly. Like communism was defined, there were 10 amendments of the builder of communism, and every member of the party had to memorize them by heart. You know, literally 10 rules, like 10 amendments. Um, Something like that does not exist now, but I'm pretty sure they're working on it. Okay, and well, just an example: church, Russian church. The popes get out there and sanctify the ballistic missiles that are called Satan.
Mhm. Yeah, the holy water, Bishop Kirill
I,
or Archbishop
I mean,
Kirill. Yeah.
in my world, I'm a Christian. That just something is wrong there. Okay, they come out and they sanctify monuments, new monuments to Joseph Stalin,
Mhm,
who destroyed old Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, who,
mhm,
at his personal order, 120,000 popes were executed just for the reason that they were popes of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And then these popes come out and sanctify and call him hero, and then he did a great things. Like, what's going on here?
yeah,
I don't understand. Okay, the recent example is one of the popes of who was head of at one of the churches, not the highest rank, but kind of a pope that goes out and speaks to people every single day. He was fired from the church, ousted, because he refused to say a new sermon by
right.
Archbishop Kirill that was calling for the win of Russian weapon. So he said he didn't want to do anything with war, and that's not his value as a Christian pope.
Mhm.
And then he was fired, ousted. Okay,
Yeah, this was just a week ago. Yeah.
yeah, that's the recent news. So when you call evangelicals in America, who perceive Russian values, you tell them that.
Yeah,
See
so
how
that
they feel about that.
that's right, and what they're hearing is, like, from Tucker Carlson and others, they're hearing that Ukraine has gotten rid of the, Ukrainian Russian Orthodox Church. I might be saying that incorrect, but that's, where they're feeding ammunition or propaganda or whatever into Ukraine. Ukraine has outlawed that. How terrible on Ukraine. Well, there's more to the story here of the way, and I'm not, trying to attack the Russian Orthodox faith, but I think the Russian Orthodox Church has been being used by the state in a significant way to gloss over or to cover for or to promote whatever Putin is doing. And that's my perception, at least from the outside looking in. Is that fair?
Very fair. As they say, I love my country, but I can't stand its government. Okay, it's the same thing with church. No one is talking about faith. Eastern Orthodox faith. That's what I was baptized in. I grew
Hmm.
up. My grandmothers, in secret, baptized me.
Hmm.
And this is who I am. But when we're talking about Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, you know, another thing, learn of Russian Eastern Orthodox Church history. The fight started not at the start of the war
Hmm.
between the Ukrainian church and the Russian church. Because, so you understand, Ukraine, I was born in a city of Rostov-on-Don, about 40 miles from the border of Ukraine. If I took a pebble and threw it real hard, it would land on the Ukrainian soil. Okay. I used to
But
go and
you got
see
you got
football
big
hockey.
guns, so
Yeah. Well, relatively speaking, So I used to drive to Donetsk to watch football or hockey games, and it took 2 hours from my door to the door of a stadium. 2 hour drive.
Mhm.
Um, the same values, the same people, the same language, the same. I never felt abroad when I went to Ukraine. And people prayed in the same way as we did, as I
Mhm.
did. And I spent about a year in Ukraine, and in Odessa, and Kharkov, and Kiev, in Donetsk. I traveled quite a bit, and the same, the same. The thing is, there were two different churches. I don't know how you call it, chapters of the church, of Eastern
Yeah,
Orthodox Church, and it
denominations
was
or yeah.
right. It was all about the money and the influence, the
Mhm.
power. And Ukrainians wanted to take over, church in Ukraine, and Moscow Patriarchate, I think that's how it's called. They were fighting for their assets
Mhm.
and are saying that their church is right and Ukrainian is not right. And then a few years ago, there is organization like G7 meeting in the politicians, same thing in the church. It's called Synod, Священный Synod, and it
Mhm.
happens in, I think, in Istanbul, Constantinople.
Mhm.
And They kicked out Russian Eastern Orthodox Church out of this church organization a few years before the war. Okay,
Mhm.
and they ruled that Ukrainians have control of their own church. But it doesn't mean anything more than that. The church is still, Eastern Orthodox Church is still the
Sure.
same.
So
And
nothing.
now Russians are saying we are denazifying Ukraine. It's the same church. Who are you denazifying? Are
Yeah.
you bringing like peace to Satanists or something like, or like uh, what's going on? It's the same church, this absolutely same, with the same popes. They pray in a same way, nothing different there. And then how do people perceive from abroad what's happening between the churches? They're saying, oh, Russia is bringing, what values is Russia bringing that is different from Ukraine? Is about hard work, about Christianity, about freedom, about families. Okay, what new values Russia want, radical values Russia want to bring to Ukraine?
Mhm.
That's what I don't understand. How people don't see that.
Yeah. So nothing's changed in the theology of either branch of the church, but it seems like what Russian commentators or big like Solyov and those kind of characters are talking about. They cloak themselves under God as if they're like very devout, and Russia is the only country that God favors, and the rest of the world is evil. And I'm just trying to understand the connection between how they champion these values, not necessarily living that, and think that the rest of the world is Satan. Help me understand that because that's really the disconnect.
Um, I'm still trying to understand myself, to be honest with you, because I just, there are many questions that I have and I don't have answers. Okay, and I try to explore, okay, as much as I can. First of all, Russian propaganda divides the world into two parts: the
Mhm.
friendly part and the unfriendly part. The unfriendly is the evil satanic West, of course, led by the United States. Um, no good people, absolutely. The Anglo-Saxons, the UK, or European countries, and then there's a friendly part of the world, the friendlies, as they call them: North Korea, China, of course, Iran, the Shia Muslim. It's just funny, I'm sorry. The African countries, anyone, everyone who is not against Russia is a friend, but not too many countries like that.
Mhm.
So, uh, who see this people who are bombing the ships? They're also friendlies, I guess. Um, that's a clear distinction that the propaganda does. Then they don't push the Christian agenda. Okay, all these people, Solovyov and the propaganda, they
Mhm.
leave that to the church, because right now whatever is religion is very shaky ground for everyone, because church, that's power of the church can do anything. Okay. um Church is quickly becoming part of the government, and it
Yeah.
needs to be distinct very much. And then I'm seeing this process. Russians don't understand what happens when the church gets power. Okay, it
Mhm.
gets corrupted, it gets destroyed from within, and then it changes church from the inside, changes the values, and that's what's happening. At least what I think what is happening. Okay, um, they say one thing, they talk the talk, but uh, they don't walk the walk. That you can't walk the walk, because the reality they portray is one thing, and the reality that exists is completely different thing. And that actually is the biggest question that I have to all Russians, because they live in Russia. They see what happens every single day, and they don't question. They silently and passively accept it. Okay, um, but
So
that's
you're talking about
basically
what
what's
they
going on.
project, right? What is it
Yes.
that they want to project beyond Ruski Mir good, rest of the world's evil? They want to project. I mean, it seems like they're just trying to cloak themselves in God in order to project how good the Ruski Mir is. So how is that accurate? And how do they project it? What means do they use to project that image?
You told me just that they use God as the key point of the Ruski Mir, which is, I think it's a little different. The
Okay.
the Ruski Mir itself is God, and the
Oh
God
wow.
is supporting Ruski Mir. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's what it is. It's not like, oh, God is, and then we are Ruski Mir are the servants of God. No, it doesn't work like that. We are Ruski Mir, okay, and God is with us. That's more like it.
Wow.
And they don't have a clear explanation what Ruski Mir is. If you ask
Mhm.
any Russian, they will have a vague understanding of it. Okay, like I said, they have not defined it, perhaps yet, but at this point, this definition does not exist. There are a couple philosophers, Dugin, couple others, that they based the idea of Ruski Mir on their works. Okay, but again, it's not defined.
So this is we're not servants of God. It's God is almost our servant. God is empowering us because we are the thing. Yeah.
The values, we are Russian, the traditional, there we come the traditional values. God helps us, God empowers us, because we are the last remnant, the last pillar of traditional values in the world. Okay, and that's why it justifies everything that we do. We are to denazify Ukraine, and after Ukraine, everyone else who needs to be denazified. And that is good. And God is with us. How do you know? Look at the popes. They support what we do. They sanctify soldiers going to the war. They say, well, you go to, if you killed, like kid you not, that happened. If you killed in the battlefield, you go to heaven. What the heck? What
Yeah.
this is a part of Christian world? Is this a
Yeah.
traditional value? So I guess it is. It's just you gotta understand, that the traditional values can be different in Russia and everywhere
Yeah.
else. Okay?
As someone, I take my faith fairly seriously, right? And so I'm my read of the Bible, I hear very different notes from the way that they describe things here. And so that's what prompted this to begin with. Okay, let me expand the lens a little bit because when I reached out to you, you were saying, yeah, it's beyond just this. Tell us other places where Americans don't understand how Russia actually thinks, and we try to read in our own values like certainly the Russians wouldn't do this, certainly Putin wouldn't do that, where we just don't get it because you understand my question?
I understand. It is a right question, by the way. It's very right question to ask. I've been asked a lot. I've been commented on a lot, and I've heard it a lot in my channel. Um, For example, I put out a video about how the food lines are back to Russia
Mhm.
for one specific food item, eggs. And well, there is no shortage of eggs in Russia at this point. But the problem is they have gone up in price tremendously. And there are food lines for eggs when they're sold cheap. Okay. But that is the very first step on the way to food shortages. Okay. Because Russian government is trying to, well, not trying, but is seizing more and more control over the economy. Okay, it's
Mm.
not market economy anymore. It's more of a more and more planned economy. Okay, and the planned economy equals
Yep.
shortages of everything. Living standard is somewhere near dirt. Okay, and we've been there before. We've done that before. We know how it smells. And then I release a video about that, and people start commenting from the United States. Saying, "Wow, wow, we would never think it would be possible in Russia, such a rich country." Well, now obviously Russians are ready to stand up and they're
Right.
ready to, say no to the government. Um, Another example.
So
Um,
before you go on to the other example, so what happened yesterday was surprising to me, and you talked about this. What happened, the protest, because I just don't expect Russia to stand up and protest. Was the injustice of this guy getting the sentence for hardly doing anything? Like he used a particular phrase that could like he was referring to the Mongols or something. Like, was that injustice just so great that it brought people out to the streets, or do you see that? Like, yeah, speak to that.
yes, it was injustice um, done to that guy. Okay, and he's very popular among the indigenous people of Bashkiria, Bashkirs. And they came out to show the support. And in the video yesterday that I did, one of the fragments was as a huge crowd standing, but they're not rioting. They're not
Mhm.
screaming. Uh, they are just out there to show the support to this fella. Okay, and what happens then? The government once the crowd gathers, then the government people, Rosguardia, come out and they start pushing. They started using force on people, and then it becomes uncontrollable process. Anything can happen after that because once there's a science actually that studies the crowd behavior. I'm not an expert on that, but I understand that once first blood is spilled, so to speak, once someone is beaten or dragged, people can become wild, mad, violent, and then clashes start. So the initial spark was the injustice being done to that fella,
Mhm.
and I mean, in my eyes, he didn't really do anything criminal. If he used offensive language, definitely not enough to land him in prison for 4 years. Okay,
Mhm.
I don't know. They could have fined him like $100, warned him or something. But instead, he's such a popular activist among people that I guess the local government saw him as a threat and decided to eliminate him in a legal way. Legal way. So that's to answer this question. But I'll jump to what I was saying before. So Americans, not just Americans. People in Europe kind of think the same
Mhm.
way. Okay, so when they saw the food lines, and then they immediately start saying, "Well, finally, the time has come that the Russians would not take it anymore. Now we're gonna see what happens." Then mothers of the mobilized men and the wives stand up and start, speaking loudly and publicly against the war. And well, actually they speak for their man to be brought back.
Uh-huh.
uh, and then a lot of people in the west say, well, finally it started happening. Well, finally.
Yeah, it's not gonna.
That's it's not going to happen. It doesn't work like that because Russians are professional sufferers. uh, well, this is truth. When I my grandparents were alive, I talked to them, and I was very interested in learning their story, the history of the family, and the stories. So My father's family, part of the family, was executed by Bolsheviks.
Well,
They only, for one simple reason, because they were well-to-do. They worked a lot. My great grandfather had a mill, a couple fields where they grew wheat, and a store. So they would make wheat flour, baking flour, and sell it at the store. So Bolsheviks in 1918 or 1920, they came and they killed the entire family, including children and women. And my grandfather was the only person who ran away. He was a teenager at the time, so he was running around the country, settled in the Caucasus, and then somehow he got away punishment, so to speak. And then he was mobilized, fought in World War II, and my family was created after World War II. So my mom's side, same story. My family came from the south of Russia, except for my mom's family was not. They were not executed, but they were sent to Vladivostok or the Far East. Okay, Silka, and they came back, but all the riches, obviously, that they had were taken away from them, and they were struggling. My grandmother's mother told me that there were three of them, three sisters, and parents, and the father was yanked and sent first, and then they were going across the entire country to see him, and they just walked out, and everything was on them: fur coats, couple rings, and they were hoping from train to train through the entire country, and they were starving. So they would sell their fur coats, exchange for bread, that type of thing. So my family was absolutely poor. Okay, my mom, my when she was growing up, in a hut that my grandfather built himself after World War II, and the floor was dirt. They had to press the floor so somehow they could walk on it. Okay, um, I call that professional. It's not just my family; it's all the families
yeah.
were like that. That's professional sufferers. They did not ask questions; they just lived on. Okay, and for generations, happened in the very same way. Life became better and better with each generation, but I mean, it's not that great. Okay,
Yeah.
I never starved. I had always had roof over my head. For the family of three, we had a apartment of about 600 square feet, and it was considered luxury. Okay, we never had a car. All our money that my parents made went to food,
Hmm.
things like that. So you got to understand that those people who remember the old days, and there are quite a few, I still remember the old days.
Hmm.
They grew up suffering. They grew up in hardship, and hardships right now, life, despite everything what's going on, it's still better than in the USSR. Okay, it's far from the point when it's going to break them and make them go and
Right.
protest. Okay,
Right.
and on the other hand, they are sold this idea that the evil West, the Satanists, want to destroy Russia. They want to destroy the sovereignty. Why? Because the Russian world, is the beacon, the last hope for the world, the beacon of light. But these evil people all around want to break Russia apart. And of course, you need, times are tough, and the government is doing everything it can, but the more tougher times coming. So on one hand, you need to support your country, to support Ruski Mir,
Hmm.
and well, yes, you may suffer, but hey, what are you gonna do? On one hand, they have that thought, and on another hand, they remember the old days and say, hey, it's still better than the USSR. Okay, and that's why they're not going to stand up. That's why the food lions are not going to do anything at
Yeah.
this point.
So
It's
correct me if
going to
I'm
boil sooner or later. Okay, it's going to erupt, but it's away. It's far away from what it is. But then the people in the West, when they see that, they say, "Whoa, of course they're gonna stand up. Of course."
yeah.
Or now, what's happening all over Russia is the utilities. The heat, there's water, electricity blackouts, and the people say, "Well, now since Russians seeing that." they definitely gonna put up a fight. No, they won't. Okay, because they've seen that before.
So,
They're fighting. They're just toughing it out for the Russian world. So
so correct
that's
correct me if
different
I'm
perspective.
wrong. We have no idea the degree to which I've heard this from multiple sources, to which Russian people are willing to endure suffering. And like they're just going to endure and endure and endure and endure and endure. And we can't even wrap our minds around the degree to which they're willing to go in the US. Like we just don't get it. Is
You
that fair?
just you you don't even understand how bad it can get. You've never been there before. Okay. I remember I came to the USA in 1996, which is not the worst time in Russia. Things were getting better. And 5 years after the breakup of the USSR, and I was amazed how in America it seemed like paradise, despite all the troubles, in the economy, despite every country has good parts and bad parts, but
Mhm.
despite all the bad parts I saw, and I was like, wow, it's impossible. It can't be like this in life, you know. So I think you have no idea how low can Russians uh, fall and not protest. Okay. Moreover, they're gonna be blaming you more and more for all the troubles
Right.
that they are enduring because they're gonna be sold it by the Russian propaganda. They're gonna buy it. So the harder that it'll get, the more hate they're gonna be projecting towards the West.
So I'm gradually coming. So you talk about the Russian economy quite a bit, and this is happening to the economy, and that's is happening to the economy. And at a certain point, the economy breaks, and it may very well be that that is what stops the war rather than the war itself. Now, the war itself is grinding the economy. I don't know the degree to which it's having such an impact, and I'm not an economist. I don't claim to be, but I'm coming to the position that I think it's the end may very well happen in Russia rather than in Ukraine. I'm just gradually moving toward that, but not because the people are suffering and they're going to revolt. I think you would see an acute moment of something, and that changes things. That's just my speculation. What do you think?
I keep on repeating that the change in Ukraine, the win for Ukraine, will not come from the front lines, but will
Hmm.
come from inside Russia. And I also believe that it will not come from people, or at least it will not be initiated by people.
Hmm.
It will be a power struggle
Hmm.
between the power groups, the clans inside the state. Because to simplify the my how to explain Russia in a very simple words, Russia is a mafia clan.
Hmm.
Okay, imagine Brooklyn, New York.
Hmm.
There's tons of people living in Brooklyn, and tons of businesses and tons of money, banks, everything. And then there's mafia that controls everything. Um, at some point, mafia gets so strong and it replaces everything. It replaces police. It controls all the hospitals. Mafia becomes legal. Okay,
Hmm.
and it's controlled by one family and family members. There are about 10. They're not family members, but they're close friends. They go way back together. And that's what Russia is. The very head of mafia, the Don, he just gives his friends different industries to control, different businesses that he annexes, that nationalizes. Basically, he just calls the shots, and um, there are conflicts that um, appear among friends. He is the judge.
Hmm.
Okay, that's his main function. Um, and what I'm seeing is sooner or later, one of the clans, one of the power groups inside Russian government will start suffering. They all start suffering now because they all depend on the economy, depend on how much money in the economy, and they will start feeling the heat. They have already started feeling the heat. Okay, and the changes in Russia will happen at exactly at the time when someone will decide that it is no longer profitable to have this balance of power, but some people gotta go and be replaced with others. Okay, when that happens, then the change will come to Russia. People will be involved, they will be manipulated a great deal, but then again, once things start getting hot, um, people who design these changes, they might lose control. Okay,
Mhm.
and things might go uncontrollable, just like in the USSR would happen. Look,
Yeah.
no one really wanted the USSR to fall apart. They wanted to change it a little bit, and then instead, very quickly in 3 days, it fell apart. Same thing might happen in Russia, but again, I believe that the change will come from inside, and the change will be initiated. Will start when certain people inside the Russian government decide that they've had enough with this balance of power. They want something different. They want someone new to control something. Things like that. So
It seems
that's
it seems to me like if that happens, it'll happen not gradually, but very quickly.
oh yes, it
Yeah.
will happen quickly. Look, it already happened once. Look at Wagner mutiny, June 24th.
Mhm.
In 90 minutes, dude comes in and takes Rostov-on-Don, 1 million people city. He takes, there's plenty of army troops. There's a army HQ, armed forces HQ, that controls the entire war in Ukraine. There are two generals, top generals after Shoigu. Well, top 3 and 4 generals in the entire Russia in Rostov. There's plenty of KGB. There are thousands of cops, thousands of Rosguardia, and guess what happens? They disappear in
Mhm.
90 minutes. Boom. Okay, and this guy takes over, and he's televised. He's humiliates on public the entire country. He humiliates the top generals, okay, like their boys, and he decides to go and topple Putin. He openly says, "I am going to dethrone Putin," and he moves in 7 or 8 hours. He moves to Moscow, and if he pushed further, he would have taken over the Kremlin because it was abandoned. Okay, look how fast things changed, and the changes that will come in Russia, they
Yeah.
will be in the very same matter.
So you think he was actually trying to take Putin? Like I thought he was just trying to make his
No, he
name
said that.
as a
No,
higher
you
level capo within
you
the mafia under Putin.
you are uninformed on that because in
I could
his
be
Telegram
wrong.
channel, or he clearly said Putin just made a mistake. When Putin, I think he came out publicly and said that the gangsters are running Chevaka Wagner now, and then they need to be dealt with, and the Chevaka Wagner fighters were uninformed, and the criminals. After that, Chevaka Wagner owner Prigozhin came out and said, Putin made a mistake. We're going to take him down. And he made
Oh,
an order to move to Moscow. And they started moving. Okay, I thought it would take them a couple days to move because I used to drive on the very same highway,
mhm.
M4. I used to drive from Moscow to Rostov. I had two houses there, and if you drive real fast, it takes you like 10, 11 hours. So I thought it would take them a couple days with all that heavy machinery and so forth. It took them 8 hours.
Mhm.
Okay, so but he clearly stated that Putin made a mistake. We're going to take him down. I'm not sure he meant to kill him or to dethrone him, but definitely to take him down. My idea was that he would come to Moscow, would move into the Kremlin, and would start negotiating with all those groups. And as he was
Ah,
moving to Moscow, people started flying out of Moscow. The oligarchs, it's easily, you can see their planes
yeah.
taking off in the air. Okay. Putin left, his plane left, he went to St. Petersburg. Mishustin, the prime minister, left, and the ministers started like running away, and everyone was silent for the day. So that was a coup attempt. Okay. And in my opinion, it was a successful because right next to my apartment in Moscow, and was right next outside of Moscow major highway, they started putting bags with sand for a machine gun
Mhm.
points. Okay, but the thing is, the only ones siloviki left in Moscow were cops, and they would never fight Chivika Wagner. Come on,
Mhm.
come on. In Russia, all cops disappeared. They all came back to Rostov after Chivika Wagner left. So if
So
he pushed, he would have taken power in Russia, and that happened
yeah.
in a matter of hours.
So the big question then is, why did Putin let him live and make the deal? Was it just to find out information, to smoke out whoever else would have been for that 2 months that he allowed him to still survive before the plane accident?
They knew who was with him. They knew the top general. It turned out to be he was part of Chivaka Wagner at the same time as the head commander of all the forces in Ukraine. Um, my question is not why Putin did what he did. My question is, why did Prigozhin believe Putin?
Yeah,
Why would he trust Putin? Why would he stop? I mean, that was, when I
that
heard
is a
that
good question.
he was saying that, okay, we're turning around and we're moving to Belarus. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And in my streams, and I streamed like basically all the time during those 2 days, and I said, look, Prigozhin is a dead man walking. I mean,
Mhm,
there's no way. He humiliated Putin so much. He opened the Pandora box. He showed that it's so easy to destroy, to win over this, defeat the vertical of power. All you need to do is 20,000 armed men. And some were saying he only had 5,000. Okay,
mhm,
so imagine that. He downed 8 aircraft,
mhm,
attack helicopters. He downed like a big plane, military plane. He killed 18 servicemen. And, I mean, Putin came out and he gave a press conference when he was begging Russians to support him and protect him, to unite against him. Okay. Putin's hand was shaking. I never saw him looking so small, and he was humiliated publicly. There's no way he would leave Prigozhin. He would let Prigozhin live.
mhm,
It was only very obvious and very logical. He would make a lesson out of Prigozhin, saying, "Hey, look, this is what's going to happen to everyone who dares to raise against me." And
mhm,
then he did 2 months later. You know that Prigozhin was shot down some 40 kilometers from the house where Putin lives, one of his houses
mhm,
near Moscow. It's very symbolic.
mm.
So my question is, why would he trust Putin?
Yeah, I mean,
I
that
don't
didn't make any
understand.
sense to me either.
What Putin did, what makes sense, perfect sense, because he couldn't have killed Prigozhin right after, um, because it would not look good. Okay, he made everyone wait. He made it. In Russia, we say to have good mask when you play bad. Okay, he tried to save his face, and I think that's what he did actually, among other power groups at least.
So, huh, yeah, and no one was surprised when Prigozhin died. Like, no one was like, "He died in a plane crash? How ironic." Nobody was saying that. Everybody knew what was going on with that. Alright, well, at any
Are you?
rate,
Do you mean the Russians or the government officials?
well, I just mean no one looking at this scenario was surprised that this is gonna happen to Prigozhin, and everybody knew Putin was behind it, whether he was directly or indirectly, and it turns out it was indirectly through his, uh, chief of security or whatever, so
Okay, this actually surprises me the most is that Russian people. I'm not talking about government, not foreigners, but Russian people take it so easily. They
yeah.
they don't ask questions. They don't critically think. They don't try to put dots together. Try to put two and two together. They just, oh, that happened. All right, let's move. Oh, by the way, do you know that one of our heavyweight professors in one of best colleges in Russia just proposed this week, and it's going to be in my Friday Crazy Russian News update. He proposed to ban outright critical thinking. To you as a professor, it must be pretty amusing. Okay.
Oh, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I don't even know what to say to that. I like.
I don't know what to say either. I'm gonna give evidence. He publicly proposed to ban critical thinking.
So you just have to accept whatever is stated by the state, I guess, is
Pretty much, yes.
wow.
Church and state, yes. We'll see what happens out of it, but usually, it works like this. As a spark, they start talking about it, and they don't make changes overnight, but they can introduce this idea and they make it grow, and
Mhm.
then they make change out of it. So, and this is the biggest question. But if they ban critical thinking, they probably have banned it quite some time ago. It's just they're secretly doing something to Russian
Yeah.
people. They don't critically think.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a note to end on. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. It really helps uh, provide context to how we should be thinking about how Russia actually works. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Good luck to you.